from the depth instant tutorial.
Today we're going to make a classic airplane, also known as propeller plane. I recommend you to build the fuselage of the plane, which is the plane body, and wait with building the wings, because the wings will be built where kind of close to mass center. If we do that, we will get much greater maneuverability and stability. We might also want to build the wings a little bit above mass center, so it kind of hangs from the wings a little bit, and that will basically help with a more stable plane. Unstable planes can actually be beneficial, because if you have that, you will not be hit as often. You will not also be able to hit with your kinetic weapons, so if you have a really unstable plane, you should absolutely rely more on missiles. You can see I have built this design using wood, and wood is fairly light, so if you have a light thing, then it will be a little bit easier to make it fly naturally. And stone and metal is a little bit more heavy, but alloy is actually lighter than wood. So I would recommend most people to build their plane out of alloy, it's better. You can use wood if you want it to be cheaper, or for aesthetical reasons. We are now going to add an engine. For this design we are going to use a fuel engine. I'm going to add a fuel engine, which is a injector based engine, and I've already made a tutorial for this. If you want to know how to make this, please check out my fuel engine most powerful type of fuel engine tutorial. It's an instant tutorial, just check the playlist. In any case, remember that the exhaust pipe needs a straight line backwards into infinity to be able to release the exhausts for some reason. That's just how it works, do not question it. So how much fuel do we need to power this thing? Well, if we add one, we have 100 extractable per fuel. However, do not get fooled, because apparently there is like an inherited 50 materials extractable per fuel inherit by, I don't know, just a design in general. So one of these adds 50, which means we'll need more, like 3 of them to be exact. Basically, just look at the stats. We estimate you require 192 materials per minute for fuel. Just add fuel tanks so that you will reach to that level, and add them in a sensible area of your ship. Alright, now it's time to make the little propeller, and I just added this little cylinder to put it on. So we just will go to R, and then we go to propeller hub. You will notice if you played the game a while ago, there was something called Daddy Blades. That is no more. Now we have the propeller hub, and we have propeller blades. So just select some propeller blades, and you can just add them to the side here. You will get minus points if the propeller is not symmetrical. So you want each of these wings on the opposite side to be the same length. You can see it has a clearance value, clearance below 90%. So we basically have a 90% efficiency, because you can see these blocks with excess, that are blocks behind it which are close enough to cause some kind of issue, and that adds more drag, and that means that air we push doesn't basically count. If you want to have 4 propellers, it will be smaller, but if you have like 2 propellers, you can make them longer in case you are having some clearance issues. You can do that. In any case, you can go into the propeller and you can go to extra configuration. And inside of here, there is like loads of values you can set to change the appearance of the blades. It doesn't have an effect, it just looks differently. For example, red cedar is a must. Right, find something you like and just set it to that. Very nice. So now we have propulsion. So we of course need an AI for this setup. We don't need a big complicated AI, we do not really need that, but we need something. We're gonna have an inter-vehicle transmitter to transmit the data between different vehicles. We're gonna have a wireless transmitter to connect that other components. We of course need the AI mainframe with a little brain inside. And we have connected a AI card slot. On this we have a target prioritization card. We're going to set it per block, so the fewer the block a craft has, we're going to target it. This plane will just target small targets, because big targets it can't deal with anyways very well, so it's better it selects the smaller target to combat. Either it's a small boat or a small plane, the plane will choose to go after it. We have one general processing card here, and if you want to be real lazy with the AI setup, go to plug and play and just select circling airplane or bombing run or something like that, and it will most likely be kind of fine. You should know the approximate center of mass before setting up the wings. So I'm going to build the wings outwards kind of like this, and they're gonna be this thick, I'll just decide it. And then we'll need to connect them up a little bit. Right, so when making airplanes, the air drag will affect us very much. So you kind of want to make stuff pointy like this. Now this is a propeller plane, and this type of design will never be your fastest plane. They really won't, but you still want to make them as fast as they can be, and that means streamlining the fuselage and the wings as much as possible. And for this kind of 1 meter wing design which we are making, we can't do much better than this. Well, we could set up wings that look like this, but that doesn't look cool, so you have to make some decision between design and function. So now we're going to add some wing parts basically. We're going to have the tailplane, the ailerons, the aero elevators, and the aero rudders. And then you only select the blocks, you don't need to set them up later, so that's super handy to just do. It's just, yeah, they're very nice. So how do we do this? Well, we are having ailerons. Ailerons, you are rolling with them. So look in your plane's direction and face forwards, and then you click the G key, like in Great or Gmodism, and then it's aligned forward. Some of these, they kind of matter a little bit how you put them, so you want to make sure you just aim forwards, click G, and there we go. And these are most effective if they are at the outer edges of the main wing, and you want to have them lined up with the like axis of mass of center basically. So I'm going to add 4 of them here, maybe 6 like that, maybe 8. That should be enough indeed. And then we have the pitch only. So we'll just make sure it's facing forwards, and we're of course going to add the pitch control in the back here. So here you can see I add that there. And then we have the rudder jaw, and that is of course the steering back and forth. And it's of course better if all of these are actually aligned up better with the mass of center, but if that's not possible, we'll just do as closely as we can. Then there is something called tail planes, and these are the thing combined. It's actually doing both of these. So we can, for example, replace some of these with tail planes, and they can both pitch and yaw. And the great thing with like tailplanes and all these wing parts basically is they don't actually have to have contact surface with the air. We can, for example, hide a couple of extra tailplanes inside of this wing, even though we shouldn't be able to have something that's added here that actually works. We can just add a couple of there, and they will indeed work. And you note that we have blocks in front of these wings, and that still works. And you don't need to have blocks in front of your wings. I only have it for, well, make it more sturdy and for aesthetical reasons. Right, so now we have the ailerons, and you'll see they'll kind of shape out here a little bit to kind of form some kind of wing. Now we need to use the custom wings, and because we already made the shape of our plane using blocks like this, we only need to use like the flat wing pieces. But if you are so inclined, you can of course shape out some nice wing using these well, wing pieces and just shape them out nicely. You can do that. And now we want to put some lift above the mass center-ish. And we might as well have them closer to the middle if in case we lose one wing, we don't want the entire thing to be kind of messed up. So we can just add a few like that, and don't go overboard. Do not add too many. It's kind of enough with having quite few of them. Now we can see that the lift is actually further back than the massive center, so we could try and see what happens if we put them here. And here we can see the lift massive center is now more closely related to the actual massive center, and well, we'll do like that for the time being. Now this might sound a little bit weird to you, but what I usually like to do when it comes to airplanes and, well, ammunition, is to put the ammo boxes in the edges of the wing, so basically out here, and basically completely unprotected too. And this is because it's very unlikely that something will hit an ammo box so far out. And if they do, it's probably gonna be kinda okay. We might still be flying and surviving even we lost one wingtip. When it comes to the AI, we need to set this thing up to maneuver a little bit like an airplane. So we go to this and select a behavior. Now we are selecting a battle behavior, and basically we can do some different stuff here. We can do circle. Many planes just circle at the around the enemy, or we can do attack run. So we have attack run 2 with U-turn and attack run 1 and 2. We are going to do attack run 1 with flyover. Just click that to make sure it's active. Here we have an adjustments. Here it can be a good idea to set something like minimum altitude above land and minimum altitude above water. 50 meters is very little for an airplane, and I would probably want to set in at least 150. Max altitude, if you have this too high, your plane might actually lose control. So we're gonna set the max altitude to 600 for the time being. Might change that later. We should set it to avoid all vehicles, and we can set the vehicle type to be in air. Now we need to add a maneuver, and this is an airplane 1.0 or 2.0. Again, it's a different thing. For this one, we're going to set it up to airplane 1.0 because it's more basic. We have banking turns and stuff like that. It's pretty straightforward. We don't need to tinker with this. But again, check both and see how your plane behaves, because all planes are different on how they are behaving using these different well, maneuvers. It can be quite different, so I do recommend you to well, try both. One note from the future about the AI setup and the AI settings inside of here. If we go to this one, you can see attack run altitude. If we set this thing 20 meters below the target, you do not need to worry about your plane going into the water, because your plane will still be restricted by the minimum altitude above and below land. So you can go ahead and set it below. For my craft, this should be actually going under enemy targets. But this is a boat and it doesn't go under it. No, it still works. Right, and now we need to add another component. Actually, we can have the processing card somewhere else, because we want to have a behavior, additional behavior and routine card, and add it there. Because in additional, we want something called water start. Yeah, start below 10, maybe 20 meters, and stop at, say, 50, 40 meters, something like that. This will deploy balloons when we are at a too low altitude. Here we have PIDs. We can switch around with that if we have some stability or want less stability, which you might actually want. Now it is important that we add these balloons, but they must be in front of mass center. Otherwise your plane will not be able to get out of that situation. So you can see we have a connection point down below. It doesn't really matter where we aim it, but we're gonna have one there, one there, one there, and we have them on each wing here. So we have 6 balloons slightly in front of it, and just to, well, for good measure, we're going to add 2 balloons in front of here too, or maybe 1. And now, if we drop this thing, the balloons will release and they will move around again when we have gotten up into there. Very handy indeed. Now, the automatic control makes stuff behave weirdly. You can see the propeller is now stopping and starting and it's doing weird things, even though the plane is kind of maneuvering. And that is because the main propeller is set up at automatic control. So we're going to select manual control, and then we're going to set the pusher preset. So it's only using the propeller to go forwards / backwards. Not that that will happen. To stop your aircraft from going into small circles when waiting, you can go into maneuver and set the wander distance to like 500 and order complete distance to be not as exact. And that should work like absolutely fine, and your craft will actually naturally patrol a little bit. Now we need to add a couple of detectors, and to have those detectors we of course need general purposing cards. And if you're having a craft which are relying on accurate kinetic weapons, you need really good detection. If you're having a craft which is basically mostly firing just missiles, you basically don't need detection. Just have some basic stuff to even detect enemies. If you want to know more about detectors, do check my instant tutorial about, well, detector and tracking, detection and tracking. Now, making weapons for your airplane is not really the scope of this tutorial, but I will give you some little tip that is quite useful, which I think is the scope of this video. And that is when you go with your local weapon controller with a little failsafe, and this is the Shift P view if you haven't seen the first video in the instant tutorial, which you probably should watch if you haven't. In any case, inside of here you can see we have a little space. We can build a little missile area here. So this will have some missiles. So we'll have a missile controller like inside of here, and we put it on the side kind of a little bit weirdly just so we can connect up the components. Then we're going to have a identify friend or foe, because that's useful to have on something like this, on everything actually. If you want to use any type of radar or sonar seekers, you want to identify friend or foe, definitely. So how do we control the missiles? Well, put a missile transmitter on it. And it does cost a little bit, but then we only need to have some receivers on where we will actually have the missiles. So our missile is inside of here, a controller, stuff like that. We can set them up to not require so much accuracy, maybe like that. And a missile, identify friend or foe. And this is enough. Then we can add the missiles on the wings out here. About maneuver also. If we select the airplane 2.0 instead, we have a very useful feature, and that is idle thrust. So we can set the idle thrust to be something like, we can see if we can survive on 10%. So it will like very slowly move around with a very slow speed of the propeller. And if we do that, we'll burn so much less materials than we otherwise would have used. So now we can see the material per second is 0.14. If we go in here and set the idle thrust to like 100, we can see that, yeah, the materials per second is like 1.5, yeah. So that's kind of a useful little trick. If your airplane has problems with going to the sky directly, it's just lifting too fast, that means you have too much lift. If you have that problem, remove some wings. If you don't want to do that, set the global wing lift factor to a lower percentage. And that should help with that problem. And when it comes to the missiles here, of course, we can just put down a wireless receiver thing there. And they are controlled and managed by the main, well, the main missile controller we have set up there. So that's a very handy trick for planes indeed. So just set this up to be, oh, well, it's already set up basically. Fantastic. And another little error finding tip. If your plane does like this, now you can see I added big guns here below it. You can see it pitches down into the water. Why is that? Well, the drag is moving around when we're flying, but you can see when we are flying, drag is kinda a little bit below lift. And if you do that, you will have a problem with pitching downwards. So if we remove them, you can see we're all fine again. So to mitigate that problem, we need to move the location of our gun, use another type of gun, or compensate with a lot of pitching power down back here. Bonus tip. Set your weapons on 2-axis turrets and limit the movement very extremely. Then you'll get much better firing angle with the same result as a fixed weapon. In fact, always put all your fixed weapons on turrets. More about this in a future video. And hopefully this will be enough for you to make your first propeller plane. If you liked this instant tutorial, make sure to like this video and stay tuned for future videos. You can of course ask if you have any questions in the comments. And lastly, I just want to say one little ending note which we usually don't do in the instant tutorials, but this time we will do it. A huge thanks to the commissioned officers in the army of Gmodism, which is the patrons. Stellar Admiral LCG Canyon, Captain Scooby Rocks, Commander Ejin, Lieutenant Asteria. Thanks a lot for watching. This is Gmodism, and we are signing out. Bye bye.